The night highway stretched out like a quiet river of black glass, reflecting the fractured glow of streetlights above. It was almost midnight, the kind of hour where the world softened into silence, and the few travelers who still remained were simply trying to get home. The warm hum of jazz played softly inside the car, steady and smooth like a heartbeat. Lieutenant Commander Renee Dawson tapped the steering wheel lightly in rhythm. Not restless, just present. Just breathing. P.S. She was dressed simply tonight. A black sweater, jeans, hair tied back. Nothing about her suggested rank, power, or her years of decorated service. If someone had looked at her in passing, they would have seen just another woman, driving home after a long day. But Renee was not just another woman. She had seen war zones, where the dust hung so thick it choked the air. She had stood on flight decks where engines roared like thunder. She had held the hands of soldiers who didn't make it home, whispering comfort into fading silence. She had survived things that most people could not even imagine. Yet tonight, she was just tired. Tired in the way only those who carry the world quietly can be. Then, flashing lights burst into the darkness behind her like an alarm, searing against the calm of night. Renee sighed, the kind of sigh that came from experience, not fear. She signaled, eased her car onto the shoulder, and stopped. Her hands rested calmly at the top of the wheel. She already knew how this worked. Too many people like her knew. The patrol car stopped behind her, its headlights glaring into her mirrors. The door opened slowly. Heavy footsteps approached. The officer who appeared beside her window wasn't in a hurry. He walked with the weight of someone who expected others to move for him. His boots scuffed the pavement like he owned it. His flashlight flicked on with a casual arrogance. He didn't greet her. He didn't explain. He didn't even pretend to be polite. License and registration, he said. Renee lifted her eyes to meet his. Calm, controlled, unshaken. Was I speeding, officer? She asked, voice smooth as the jazz still playing faintly inside the car. The flashlight beam hovered on her face for a beat longer than necessary. Your taillight's out, he replied flatly. Renee blinked. That didn't sound right. Her car had been serviced not even 2 weeks ago. But this was not the moment to argue. She reached slowly, deliberately into the glove compartment, retrieved her documents, and offered them. The officer, badge name Briggs, took them. But instead of stepping back, he leaned in, just slightly, like he was measuring her, judging her, testing the boundaries of control. Something in his eyes said he'd already decided what she was. Step out of the vehicle, Briggs said. Renee didn't move immediately. Not because she refused. She simply needed to understand. Is there a reason for that? She asked. Briggs's jaw twitched, not with surprise, but with irritation. Like someone had dared to not play the part he expected of them, because I said so. There it was. Not procedure. Not safety. Power. Renee inhaled slowly through her nose. She had been trained for crisis, panic, chaos. But this wasn't chaos. This was deliberate. A show of dominance, disguised as lawful authority. She opened the door and stepped out. The night air was cool, almost sharp against her skin. Turn around, Briggs ordered. Hands on the car. Her fingers twitched just slightly. A reflex. A calculation. Then she placed her palms flat on the roof, the metal cold beneath her touch. For what reason? She asked again, voice steady. Briggs stepped closer. Too close. His breath cold, his badge glinting beneath the streetlight. You resisting? He snapped. There were two choices now. Comply or escalate. Renee had seen enough news. to know how easily nights like this could turn into stories told with candles and posters and grief. She was not going to give him an excuse. "No," she said softly. "I am asking a question." That was all it took. Briggs grabbed her wrist, hard, twisting it behind her back. Metal cuffs clamped around her skin, too tight, intentionally tight. The steel bit into her, cutting into the calm like a blade. "You're under arrest," he barked. "For what?" she asked. "For obstructing an officer." The words were familiar, ugly, abused, used as a weapon when ego outweighed law. Briggs shoved her toward the patrol car, the plastic seat cold and unwelcoming. The door slammed, sealing her inside. Her reflection stared back at her from the partition, composed, measured, unbroken, and beneath that reflection, something simmered like quiet fire. He thought she would panic. He thought she would beg. He thought she would be afraid. He didn't know who she was. And he definitely didn't know what she was capable of. Because Renee Dawson did not break. Not in war. Not in grief. And certainly not in the back of a patrol car operated by a man who confused authority with power. This was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. The police station at midnight wasn't loud, but it wasn't quiet either. Phones rang in distant rooms. Typing echoed like restless insects. Doors opened and closed with the heavy weight of authority. Yet somehow, in all of that noise, Renee moved through it with silence. Briggs escorted her inside with the swagger of a man who believed this moment belonged to him. His boots hit the tile like punctuation marks. He flashed his badge at the desk clerk, not because he had to, but because it made him feel bigger. Renee didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. Her gaze stayed steady ahead, calm, grounded, anchored. Like a soldier marching into a battle, she already understood. Briggs stopped her in front of the booking counter. "Name," the clerk muttered, not even looking up. Briggs answered before she could. "Renee Dawson. Resisting. Obstruction. Non-compliant." He spoke like he was listing ingredients. Flat, routine, almost bored. Renee finally spoke. "I complied. I asked questions. And taking a walk, Briggs turned his head sharply toward her. A glare that meant, "How dare you speak?" Odd, but Renee held his gaze. Not aggressive. Not defiant. Just unmoved. That was what got under his skin. Odd. The clerk typed something into the system, finally glancing up. Her eyes flicked over Renee. Saw the posture, the discipline, the composure. Odd. Something didn't add up. Odd. "Prince," the clerk said softly. Odd. Briggs grabbed Renee's arm harder than necessary. His grip, that of a man who needed people to feel his authority. Odd. She didn't flinch. Not even a twitch of muscle. Odd. He pressed her fingers to the fingerprint scanner, and the machine hummed as it processed. Then a small beep. A very small beep. Odd, but a beep that changed everything. Odd. The clerk's eyebrows rose. And then her eyes widened. Her silence became a shift. "Officer Briggs," she said slowly, "you need to step away from her." Briggs frowned. Confused, irritated. "What? Why?" The clerk swallowed, her throat tight, choosing her next words. She checked the screen again, as though afraid it might disappear. United States Navy, Intelligence Division, clearance level. Because the room had already changed. Briggs stepped back, but not with respect, with embarrassment, with fear, masquerading as anger. Renee remained still. Not triumphant, not smug. Just present. The clerk's voice softened. "Ma'am, we can remove the cuffs." Briggs hesitated, but the truth was already exposed. Renee turned slightly, giving him the chance to do it himself. And that was the uncomfortable part. She didn't force him to. She didn't demand anything. She simply waited. Waiting was power. Briggs swallowed and unlocked the cuffs, and he did, though his hand trembled, just enough to betray what he felt. The metal released her wrists, the skin faintly red where the steel had bitten. No anger showed on her face, just stillness. And that was somehow worse for everyone watching. The station captain entered then, called in by the clerk's urgent message. Captain Reyes, mid-50s, composed, sharp-eyed, no patience for foolishness. He looked at Renee first, noticing posture, breath, presence. He recognized training when he saw it. Then he turned to Briggs. Slowly, deliberately. "Explain." Briggs opened his mouth, but no words came that sounded like truth. "We had a situation on the highway." He tried. Reyes cut him off, Singh. Disappointment heavy and sharp. "You initiated detainment without cause, put hands on a decorated service officer, and processed her under obstruction." Briggs' jaw flexed. "She questioned my order." Reyes stepped closer. "An officer's ego is not law." The station went silent, the kind of silence where people listen without looking like they're listening. Reyes faced Renee again. "Commander Dawson, you are free to go, and you have my apology." Renee nodded. Not graciously, not coldly, simply factually, the way soldiers acknowledge truth. "Thank you, Captain." Reyes motioned toward the exit. "If you need transportation home, Renee raised a hand gently. "I'll walk." Reyes dipped his head with respect, not exaggerated, not forced, genuine. The kind of respect that is only given to those who have lived through something real. Renee stepped outside into the night. No music played now, no headlights, no traffic. Just the quiet hum of street lamps. The air was cool and wide, and she let her breath move freely again, slow, steady, her ribs expanding like the tide. She began walking, boots tapping soft against the sidewalk. 1 block, 2, 3. Her mind finally began to unwind, not in chaos, but in clarity. This was not about the arrest, not about one officer, not about one moment. It was about something much larger, something older than tonight. Something America had been wrestling with long before Renee was born. People like Briggs didn't fear strength. They feared what strength looked like when it didn't bow. Walking beneath the streetlights, her shadow long and unwavering on the pavement. Renee whispered to herself, "I will not disappear. Not tonight. Not ever." By morning, the world had already started moving again. Coffee brewing in kitchens, buses rumbling down streets, office lights flickering on, one building at a time. But Renee's night had not ended. She had only slept 3 hours, not because she was restless, but because her mind was working. There are moments in life that don't look loud when they happen, but they echo. This one echoed. She sat at her small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The steam curled upward like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Outside the window, dawn's light broke gently across the rooftops, gold bleeding into gray. Her phone buzzed. She expected a friend. maybe her sister, maybe no one. But when she looked down, it was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something inside said answer. She slid her thumb across the screen. Commander Dawson, the voice on the other end, was calm, professional, purposeful. This is Special Agent Klein, Department of Civil Oversight. We were notified of your detainment last night. Renee didn't speak, she listened. We'd like to meet with you, in person. Renee's jaw tightened slightly, not with fear, with calculation. Today, as soon as possible. Then the call ended, and no pleasantries. Nothing unnecessary. Renee placed the phone down slowly. There was a difference between being free and being done. This wasn't done. She dressed simply, again. Black coat, black boots, hair tied back. The city streets were busy now, students rushing, cars honking, dogs pulling on their leashes, life, unaware of the quiet storm that had begun to curl around it. She walked. Not because she had no ride, but because walking gives the mind room to breathe. By the time she reached the federal office annex, sunlight had brightened to full day, crisp, clean, almost too bright. Inside, she was escorted to a conference room, glass walls, polished table. Silent air vents, humming steadily, above. A room where truth looked clean, even when it wasn't. It was structural. Like he was assembling truth, piece by piece. However, he continued, we are not here to discuss Officer Briggs alone. Renee's eyes narrowed, slightly. Then what are we discussing? Klein folded his hands. Patterns. The word hung in the room like smoke. Heavy, visible, meaningful. We've had multiple reports of similar encounters along the same patrol corridor, he said. Individuals detained without cause. Mostly late at night. Mostly certain demographics. He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. Renee stayed still, but something in her posture sharpened. Klein continued, the department can conduct a formal investigation. However, public testimony would. Renee cut in gently. No. Klein paused, surprised. No? She leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, but anchored. If I testify publicly, it becomes a headline, a debate, a political argument. My life becomes an opinion. Klein exhaled, slowly. Then what do you want, Commander? Renee's voice was steady, balanced, like someone who had been preparing for this moment long before it arrived. I want this handled quietly, correctly, permanently. Klein held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. We can do that. Not because she demanded, but because she spoke like someone who expected to be heard. Meanwhile, Officer Briggs was cracking. Not publicly, privately, in the locker room, sitting on a cold bench, jaw clenched, hands shaking. He had seen the screen in the booking office, Lieutenant Commander, Intelligence Division. He had grabbed the wrong person. And not just wrong, disastrously wrong. But his fear wasn't punishment. It was exposure. He had done this before. He had assumed before. He had escalated before. He had gotten away with it before. But this time, he had shackled someone the world did not silence. And the world was about to push back. Pard. Back outside, Renee exited the federal building into sunlight that felt warmer than before. Not comforting, not soft, just real. She didn't walk fast. She walked with purpose. A young girl passed by, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones in, the tired look of someone just trying to get through another day of school. Renee saw her younger self in that girl. Quiet, capable, underestimated. The girl glanced up, just for a second, and Renee gave her the smallest nod. No words, just acknowledgement. The girl straightened her posture, just a little. Because sometimes strength doesn't need speeches. Sometimes it just needs to be seen. Renee's night had begun with handcuffs. But today? Today she walked without fear, without apology, without shrinking. Not to prove something, but simply because she did not have to disappear to survive. And when someone realizes that, the world around them begins to change. The wind was sharp that afternoon, sweeping leaves across the pavement like scattered thoughts. Renee walked with her hands in her coat pockets, her steps steady and measured. The world around her looked ordinary. Cars passing, shop doors opening, laughter drifting from a cafe patio. But something unseen had begun to shift. Inside the precinct, Officer Briggs sat alone at his desk, though sat wasn't quite the right word. He hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at a stack of paperwork he hadn't touched. The station around him bustled, phones ringing, radios buzzing, but Briggs heard none of it. He heard only the memory of the booking room, the name, the rank, the clearance level. He had grabbed the wrong woman. No, he had assumed the wrong woman. And assumptions were harder to hide than mistakes. His fellow officers passed behind him, glancing his way. Some looked curious, others looked cautious, and one or two looked entertained. Everyone in the building knew something had changed. Everyone knew why. Briggs's leg bounced restlessly. His throat felt dry. He didn't regret the arrest. He regretted getting caught. And that was the part he didn't want to look at too closely. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Agent Klein was already reviewing files. His office was cold, lit only by the pale glow of his monitor. Row after row of reports filled the screen. Complaints filed, cases dismissed, interactions marked as resolved. But patterns don't hide from those who know where to look. Page after page held the same language, non-compliant, resisting, aggressive behavior. And the same line at the bottom, no footage available. Klein leaned back in his chair. That was the real tell. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a system of silence, not officially written, not verbally agreed upon, but grown, like mold, in the cracks where accountability should have lived. Renee, meanwhile, stepped into the Copper Lantern, a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The bell over the door jingled softly as she entered. The barista looked up, and their eyes met, just briefly, with recognition. Not fame, not publicity, respect. A quiet, knowing respect. Renee ordered tea, took a seat near the window, let her thoughts move like tidewater, slow and even. She didn't replay last night. She didn't relive the cuffs, the bright station lights, the silent anger. Those moments were behind her. She was thinking ahead. Because Renee never let one moment define her. She always looked for the one after it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Unknown number. He's being pressed. And others with him. Renee stared at the screen. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Someone was telling her. This was bigger than Briggs alone. And someone, unseen, unnamed, wanted her to know. At the station, Briggs finally pushed up from his chair and stormed into the hallway. His boots rang sharp against the tile. He made his way to Ray's office and knocked once, too hard, before stepping inside. Captain Ray's didn't look up from his paperwork. I didn't say enter. Briggs ignored that. Sir, she's lying. She's using rank to... Ray's raised one finger, just one, and Briggs went silent. Sit, Reyes said. Briggs sat. Reyes finally looked up, his expression not angry, but tired. You think this is about rank? Briggs swallowed. I followed procedure. No, Reyes interrupted, you followed habit. Silence. Reyes leaned back. Do you know how many reports I've seen land on my desk with your name in the margin? And now, Reyes said quietly, I realize I have been protecting the wrong person. Briggs felt something cold in his chest. Fear. Real fear. Back at the cafe, Renee watched raindrops streak slowly down the window now. Thin silver trails in the afternoon light. The world outside was unchanged. Yet something was unfolding beneath its surface. A truth moving in the dark. Not loud, not public, but inevitable. Maya, Renee's closest friend, slid into the seat across from her. No greeting, no explanation, just presence. Renee looked at her. Maya raised an eyebrow. You good? She asked. Renee nodded. You? Maya snorted softly. I've been better. Their silence said more than words. After a moment, Maya leaned in slightly. So what now? Renee exhaled, slow and even. They'll investigate. Quietly. And if they don't? Maya asked. Renee looked straight ahead, window reflection cutting her face into light and shadow. They will. Not because she demanded it. Because the truth had already begun to move. And once truth moves, it does not return to silence. Across town, Briggs sat alone in his parked patrol car. Rain tapped against the windshield in soft, steady rhythm. His hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white. He wasn't thinking about Renee anymore. He was thinking about every time he had done this. Every person who didn't fight. Every voice that didn't carry. Every report that no one cared enough to read. The truth wasn't that he had made a mistake. The truth was that he had been allowed to. For a long time. And now, that time was ending. The rain continued falling. Slow, deliberate. Washing the windshield clean. But some stains don't wash off with water. They require reckoning. And reckoning was coming. Morning sunlight slid across the city like a slow tide, filling the streets in a soft gold glow. The kind of light that usually means peace. But today, the peace felt thin. Like glass, Renee woke early not because she was restless, but because she needed to be ahead of this moment. She brewed coffee, black and quiet, then stood by the window as the city stretched awake. People walked dogs. Buses hissed to curbs. Life moved forward. But somewhere in that movement, something was shifting. The investigation had begun. Not in courtrooms. Not on news channels. Not in protests or petitions. But quietly. In conversations spoken behind closed doors. In files pulled from archives. In emails forwarded to the wrong people on purpose. Pressure was building. Invisible, but undeniable. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Captain Reyes sat in his office, elbows on his desk, face furrowed in a way that suggested thinking rather than anger. Across from him sat Internal Affairs investigator Lana Mercer, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Her pencil tapped lightly against a notepad, the only sound in the room. "You're sure?" she asked. Reyes nodded once. "Briggs has a pattern, and he's not the only one." Mercer leaned back, exhaling thoughtfully. "We'll need statements. Records, footage, witnesses." Reyes's jaw clenched. "You won't get footage." Mercer stopped tapping her pencil. "Deleted." Reyes didn't answer. He didn't need to. Mercer closed her notebook. Decision already made. Then we don't look at what they erased. We look at what they overlooked. Reyes nodded. Neighborhoods remember what reports forget. A plan was forming, not loud, but powerful. Briggs, on the other hand, did not know how to plan. He only knew how to react. And he was reacting badly. He stormed through the locker room, shoving open his locker so hard the metal clanged. A young officer stepped out of his way quickly. Not because Briggs was dangerous, but because he was unpredictable. Briggs grabbed his radio, then slammed it down. He could feel the eyes, the whispers, the judgment, but most of all, the fear. Not fear for him, fear of him. And that was disappearing. He was losing something he didn't even realize he had valued. Unchecked authority. And losing power feels like drowning. Outside, Renee walked through the community park, the one where families gathered on weekends, and where soldiers' memorials sat etched in stone. Children ran past her, their laughter crisp in the morning air. She sat on a worn wooden bench, the kind smoothed by years of stories told in quiet conversations. Maya joined her, 2 cups in hand. You didn't sleep, Maya said, passing her one. A few hours, Renee replied. Silence stretched, not empty, but full. Maya watched her carefully. You know they're going to come to you again, she said. Not just the investigators, the public. People will want you to speak. Renee stared ahead at a dog chasing its tail in a circle. I didn't ask to be seen, she said softly. Maya nodded. But you were. Renee turned, eyes steady. I don't want to be a symbol. Maya's voice softened, gentle but unflinching. Symbols aren't chosen, they happen. Renee didn't look away. I just want things to change. Maya exhaled. Then maybe this is how. Not loud, not dramatic, just truth, plain and heavy and undeniable. Later that afternoon, Investigator Mercer left the precinct and drove to a quiet street lined with narrow houses and chain-linked fences. She knocked on a door. A man in his late 50s answered, tired eyes, shoulders slightly bent. The look of someone who had seen too much and been heard too little. Mercer introduced herself, explained why she was there. The man's expression changed. Relief, grief, vindication. He stepped aside and let her in. There were others like him. She knew there would be. This wasn't about one arrest. This was about a history of silence being broken open. And silence, once broken, does not return to stillness. Back at the station, Reyes approached Briggs quietly. No yelling, no threats, just truth. You're being placed on administrative suspension, pending investigation. Briggs froze. You can't. I can, Reyes said evenly. And I have. Briggs's face twisted, not in remorse, in panic. Something was slipping. Something he had always assumed could never be taken away. This is ridiculous, Briggs snapped. She's using rank to... Reyes raised a hand, calm, steady. No, you used your position. Dot. And now you're being held to it. Briggs opened his mouth again, but this time no words came out. Because the truth was too loud. And the truth was that he had done this to himself. That evening, Renee returned home. She set her keys down. She sat in the quiet of her living room. Not triumphant, not celebratory, just reflective. She looked down at her wrists, faint marks still resting where the cuffs had been. Not bruises, not wounds, just reminders. She breathed slowly. And for the first time since that night, she allowed herself to feel it. Not the anger, not the humiliation, but the weight of endurance. She had walked through fire and had not let it change who she was. That mattered more than she realized. The previous would grow. Tomorrow, the investigation would grow. Stories would unfold. The next day carried a different kind of air. Not heavy, not dark, just aware. People in the city walked the same sidewalks, caught the same buses, brewed the same toffee. But there was something new underneath it all. A quiet hum. The feeling you get when you know something important is happening, even if you can't see it yet. Renee felt it too. She stood in her small kitchen, pouring tea into a mug. Steam curled upward in smooth spirals, slow, steady, intentional. It mirrored her breathing. This time, she wasn't preparing for conflict. She was preparing for clarity. And clarity has its own power. Meanwhile, Briggs sat in his car outside the station. Suspension papers on the passenger seat. Sunlight glaring off the windshield. His eyes were fixed on nothing and everything. The street, the sky, the memory of Renee looking calm while his authority slipped through his fingers. He replayed the moment she didn't break. Most people flinched. Most people yielded. Most people folded. But she didn't. Not once. That was the part he couldn't shake. Because if someone can't be shaken, then they can't be controlled. And if they can't be controlled, they expose the weakness in the person trying to control them. That was the truth Briggs feared the most. Not punishment, exposure. Investigator Mercer continued her work. Not loud, not dramatic. She sat across from people in living rooms, porches, grocery store parking lots. People who had been dismissed. People who had been talked over. People who had been told to stop making trouble. The stories were steady. Not blurred. Not exaggerated. Just real. And the reality was simple. Briggs didn't lose control one night. He had never learned to control himself in the first place. In the late afternoon, a knock sounded at Renee's door. She didn't tense. She simply opened it. Captain Reyes stood there. Not in uniform. Not rigid. Just a man trying to do something right. He held his cap in his hands. "Commander Dawson," he said softly. She nodded once. He cleared his throat. Not because he was unsure, but because he was being careful. "He wants to speak with you." Renee's expression didn't shift. "And you?" Reyes met her eyes steadily. "I think he should." Renee studied him for a moment, then stepped outside and followed. They met at the small community center near the precinct, neutral ground. Briggs stood near the back wall, shoulders tense, hands clasped in front of him. For the first time since the night on the highway, he did not look in control. Renee entered the room and stopped a few feet away. No one spoke. Silence settled. Deep, full, heavy. Briggs finally exhaled, a sharp breath like something breaking. "I wasn't supposed to get caught up in this." Renee said nothing. Briggs looked up, eyes raw, not with guilt, but with fear. "I was taught to take control before things get out of hand. That hesitation is danger. That questions mean disobedience." Pause. Renee's expression was unreadable. "I thought I was doing my job." Renee finally spoke, voice quiet, but full. "Your job was to protect, not to dominate." Briggs's face tightened, as though the words struck something inside him he didn't want to acknowledge. "You stayed calm," he said, almost like he was confessing something painful. "Even when I pushed, even when I escalated, you didn't react." Renee didn't blink. Strength doesn't need to prove itself. Then the sentence landed. Briggs's eyes lowered, shoulders sagging. I was wrong, he whispered. There was no applause, no forgiveness ceremony, no dramatic collapse. Because real accountability is not loud. It's quiet, heavy, uneasy, and it hurts. Renee looked at him, not with pity, not with bitterness, not with victory. Just truth. You can't undo the harm, she said, but you can decide who you are after this. Briggs nodded, small, strained, real. I know. Reyes stepped forward gently. This doesn't erase consequences, but it can redirect them. Briggs closed his eyes. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't attempt justification. He simply stood in the weight of his own actions. And that was the first real step he had taken in years. When Renee walked back outside, the evening light was warm, the sky painted in soft oranges and violets. The kind of colors that arrive after storms. Maya waited for her beside the steps, leaning against the brick wall. Renee didn't speak. Maya didn't ask. They just walked together, side by side, the quiet between them full and easy. People think strength is loud, but real strength is holding your ground without raising your voice, standing in truth without demanding a spotlight, refusing to disappear. That was Renee. That had always been Renee. And now the world knew it too. Days passed. Not in dramatic headlines, not in viral speeches, but in quiet shifts. The internal affairs investigation deepened, not just into Briggs, but into the culture around him. Old reports were reopened. Body cam logs were audited. Supervisors were questioned. Policies were rewritten. No one announced it. No big public statement. No trending hashtags. But change was moving. Slow, steady, deliberate. Just like Renee. Because real change doesn't roar. It arrives. Meanwhile, Renee returned to training. Not military drills. Not combat simulation. Her training now was community. She started hosting evening sessions at the community center. Not speeches, not lectures, conversations. People came quietly at first. One or two, unsure, cautious. Then, more. Young men, young women, mothers, elders, students who were tired of shrinking themselves to survive. They talked about how to breathe when adrenaline rises. How to speak clearly when disrespected. How to hold space without surrendering dignity. Not to fight, but to not disappear. Renee didn't stand at the front like a leader. She sat among them. Present. Equal. Her strength was not above people. Her strength was with them. One evening, as the group wrapped up, Renee stepped outside. The sky was dusky blue, the air cool, the city lights beginning to flicker awake. She saw Aaron, the boy who once trembled to speak, walking toward her. His posture was different now. Not tall, not bold, but full. Present. Rooted. He gave a small nod. I played in class today, he said. Renee smiled, soft and real. How did you feel? Aaron thought for a moment. Scared, but I did it anyway. Renee nodded. Aaron looked up, eyes reflecting something new. Not fear, not confusion, but understanding. Thank you, he said. Not for the lesson, not for the words, for seeing him. Renee placed a hand on his shoulder, brief, warm, steady. Keep being yourself, even when the world tries to make you smaller. Aaron smiled. A real one, and walked off into the twilight. On the other side of the city, Briggs stood outside the precinct. No badge on his chest now. Just a man, stripped down to the truth of himself. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't defiant. He wasn't proud. He was thinking, for the first time in years. And that, too, was a kind of change. Later that night, Renee walked home beneath streetlights, her shadow long and steady at her side. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt whole. Not because she won something, but because she didn't lose herself. And that is the hardest victory a person can ever earn. She whispered to the night, "Stay steady." Not a promise, a principle. And the night, warm and quiet, held her words without needing to answer. Cut to black. Soft piano plays, the same quiet melody from the beginning, now stronger. Sometimes strength isn't in what we say. Sometimes it's in what we refuse to let break us. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to remember their voice. And until next time, stay steady, stay grounded, stay you.